Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new countdown, and in this video we're going to be counting down the top 10 most overrated comic book movies in my opinion. Now I am aware that this subject is going to be somewhat touchy, and I would imagine that majority of you would disagree with me with several of these choices. And just so we make things clear, being overrated doesn't exactly mean that I hate those movies, but rather it's just a case of me believing that some of these movies have been getting a little too much praise than what they really deserve. And to be fair, I myself do enjoy several of these movies that will be on this list, but again, I do feel like they're getting a little too much praise. But without further ado, let's begin with the countdown. So kicking off the list at number 10, we have The Avengers. And the reason why I put The Avengers at the bottom of the list is because I do understand the appeal on as to why people would still believe that this movie is among one of the best comic book movies of all time. And in all fairness, The Avengers did change the game when it comes down to superhero films. However, when you do rewatch The Avengers again and sort of toss all of the nostalgia to one side, then you would notice that quite a lot of it is kind of slow, at least until you get to the third act. And plus the film itself is relatively simple in terms of plot, tone, and pretty much all around basic in a way. Again, I really do enjoy the first Avengers movie, but personally I don't think it's any better than Age of Ultron, which is a movie that most people bash, but I honestly think that the latter is a superior Avengers movie. Coming in at number 9, we have Deadpool. Now I just want to let it be known in that I absolutely love Deadpool, and I would go as far as to put it among one of the top 20 comic book films I have ever seen. Because much like The Avengers, Deadpool did change the landscape of comic book movies, but for completely different reasons. From being rated R to having a lot of violence and sex jokes, and even having a protagonist who breaks the fourth wall. Although the main and only reason why I put Deadpool on this list is purely because it isn't exactly the first of its kind. Granted, it's the most modern example and is the most influential, when really we had the likes of Kick-Ass that even predates Deadpool. And in my eyes, if it wasn't for the former movie, then we wouldn't have something such as Deadpool, and I do feel like Deadpool's getting a little too much credit, when in reality I feel like Kick-Ass deserves more praise. And for number 8, we have X-Men Days of Future Past. Now looking back on the whole X-Men franchise, I will admit that Days of Future Past is one of the better films within that film series, but in all honesty, I feel like this should have been the true finale we deserved. And while the movie did have some great ideas such as implementing the old cast with the new, I do feel like it could have been executed a lot better, and it shouldn't have been as rushed as it truly was. Now I will say that I do understand on as to why people will put it on a high pedestal to a certain degree, but at the same time I do feel like Days of Future Past is kind of a mess, and that there are much better X-Men movies that are well polished. But I can't deny that Days of Future Past is much superior than the likes of Apocalypse and even Dark Phoenix. Coming in at number 7, we have The Dark Knight Rises. Now this next choice is somewhat debatable because it can be seen in one of two ways, either being a satisfying conclusion to a flawless trilogy, or being the black sheep of the Dark Knight Trilogy, while still being a relatively solid movie on its own. And while this movie has a fantastic villain in the form of Bane, as well as having some truly iconic moments that do rival that of The Dark Knight, ultimately it stumbles due to the fact that it has many plot holes, and even the ending does ruin the movie in my eyes. I don't think The Dark Knight Rises is necessarily a bad film, but I do feel like it missed the mark in being a truly spectacular finale, and even to this day some people still deem it to be a satisfying conclusion, when in hindsight I do feel like the Dark Knight Trilogy deserved a lot better than this. And for number 6, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I'm gonna be honest, this is the only film on this list I actually cannot stand. Not that it's necessarily a bad movie per se, but it's the fact that it's the ultimate mixed bag and should have been much better than what we ended up getting. I felt that the characterizations of certain characters were very hit and miss, and I personally thought that the effects and action scenes were beyond lackluster in comparison to the first. And while there are certain aspects of this movie in which does have heart, to me most of it felt either forced or just fell on deaf ears. But what hurts me the most about this movie is the fact that I know it had the potential of being something truly special and it just kind of fell short on so many areas. And while I wouldn't say it's the worst film in the MCU in terms of how it's made, in my eyes it is probably the MCU film that I despise the most. And for number 5 we have Thor Ragnarok, a movie who many people would deem to be within the top 5 best MCU films ever made, and honestly I wouldn't even put it in the top 10. While the effects and action scenes were fun for the most part, and that some characters do have some genuine growth, I do feel like they went a little too far with the jokes, and the drama within the movie just felt non-existent to me. And instead of having a grand finale featuring Hela being a defined villain as well as focusing on the actual Ragnarok, we instead explore most of the time on Sakaar, which just felt filler to me. And the biggest thing many people say on as to why this is among the best films in the MCU is because of how different it feels, and honestly I do feel like the movie is a mess, and it seemed like the movie was going for more of a style over substance, in which in some cases it does show. Coming in at number 4, we have X-Men 2 United. I have heard so many people saying that X2 is among the best films within the X-Men film series, and truth be told, I think this is the most forgettable out of the bunch. And to be honest, I don't really see the appeal of this one, because while it does introduce mutants such as Nightcrawler, majority of the film is centered around Wolverine, much like most of the X-Men films. And plus, a lot of it just feels kind of dated, and I don't mean just in terms of the special effects, but more in the sense that it just feels outdated. Outside of the opening with Nightcrawler as well as the Lady Deathstrike fight, I do not remember a single thing from X2. And I must admit that I honestly do prefer the original X-Men film over this one, because at the very least the plot for X-Men 1 was more basic, and plus the movie did focus more than just Wolverine. And in third place we have Batman 89. I do appreciate the film's existence in that it did kickstart a brand new era for Batman, and it did pretty much open the floodgates for many other adaptations after it. And while it is very impressive visually, and a lot of it does hold up to this day, outside of the two memorable performances from Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, I don't think this movie has a whole lot to give. We know very little about Batman and what he stands for, and instead we focus too much on the Joker's origin, which is a major misstep. And again, while the film itself is very gorgeous to look at times, I do feel like it's kinda weightless. Because the biggest thing that this film is lacking is the fact that it doesn't really have much of a good story, nor did the movie did Batman and the Joker justice. And like I said, if it wasn't for the two memorable performances, I feel like it would have suffered a lot more. And for second place we have Wonder Woman, a film that many people deem to be the very best within the DC extended universe, when really it was only that special to begin with because it was the first within that universe that was actually solid. And at first I was on the hype train myself, and I did believe that Wonder Woman was truly a magnificent film, but upon reviewing it I just thought it just wasn't as good as I remembered. Granted, Wonder Woman herself is a great protagonist, and I did enjoy the No Man's Land scene, but with that aside, a lot of the movie itself just felt like a Marvel Phase 1 movie, where yes, it is relatively solid, but it isn't exactly anything too memorable. Now in a way I do understand that many people would enjoy Wonder Woman because she is a woman role model, but as a film itself I don't think it is anything too special. And I personally feel like Wonder Woman gets a little too much praise. And finally in first place we have Sam Raimi's SpiderMan Trilogy. I was originally going to put Spider-Man 2 on there since people deem it to be the holy grail of superhero movies, but ultimately, over time I do feel like people are putting this whole trilogy in a high pedestal, despite the fact that they're not really that great in my eyes. Spider-Man 1 is fine if a little goofy, Spider-Man 2 is pretty great but I don't think it's that amazing, and Spider-Man 3 I actually hate to oblivion. And like with some of the picks on this list, I do understand the impact that this trilogy has done to the comic book genre, but in all honesty I don't feel like Sam Raimi's trilogy has aged that well. And if you toss all of the nostalgia to one side, then you would see that the movies themselves aren't really that spectacular. And as an unpopular opinion, I don't think they're any better than the Amazing series. And while the first two films are decent enough, I do feel like the hardcore fan base would rip anyone's heads off if they even so much as give the trilogy one bit of criticism. And for that last reason alone, this is why I have to give the Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy the #1 spot on this list. So what do you personally think is the most overrated comic book film you have ever seen? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.